What if the courage you need to transform your school, your district, your leadership is already inside you? You just need the right framework to unlock it. Welcome to the Courageous Edge.
Welcome to the Courageous Edge, the podcast for educational leaders who are ready to lead boldly in challenging times. I am your host, Dr. Kim Morrison, former superintendent and past president of Magnet Schools of America. Right now, educational leaders are facing unprecedented challenges, political pressures, staffing shortages, community division, and constant change. But here's what we believe: courageous leader isn't about being fearless. It is about having the tools, the framework, and making sure that we have the support to lead authentically, even when it's hard. Right now, educational leaders are looking for a podcast that is for them, that will help them lead courageously. So we may have superintendents or principals, aspiring leaders, and anyone who believes that our students deserve leaders who won't back down from doing what's right. In each episode, we'll bring you real stories, practical strategies, inspiring conversations with leaders who are living this out every single day. Today's episode is really special to us because we are the ones who've started the Courageous Leadership and the Courageous Edge podcast. We want to talk about our why we started this work, why we believe that courageous leadership is the answer that educators need right now. I'm very passionate about this. My why is to make sure that other people succeed in educational leadership. I love doing this work. I enjoy pouring myself into this work, and I know that you do too. We're going to give you really practical tools and things that you can use tomorrow, that you can begin to connect in a network to make sure that you're leading courageously and you have all the tools and strategies you need. I am thrilled to be joined today by two incredible colleagues and friends who are on this courageous journey with me. Dr. Barbara Zwadyk. Barbara has served as a senior leader in some of North Carolina's largest urban school districts, and she's currently a professor at High Point University, where she is shaping the next generation of educational leaders. I know many of you have had Barbara as a mentor, and we're excited to have her on the Courageous Edge. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you, Kim. I'm delighted to be here and part of the team.
And joining us is Murphy McConnell, who serves as the executive assistant for K&E Innovative Leadership. Many of you connected with her because of our newsletter and our events and our webinars. So now in our podcast, she will be helping out, and that is our team. Murphy keeps us organized, on track, and brings a unique perspective to our work. Murphy, we are so glad you're here.
Hey, Kim. I'm thrilled to be featured on the podcast with you and Barbara.
Together, the three of us are delivering national presentations, webinars, and training in courageous leadership. We have lots of tools available to you at no cost. If you'll just check out our website, which we will be talking about on the whole podcast, we have lots of free things on there at K&E Innovation. And we're working on a book that features stories about courageous leaders from across the country. And now we're launching this podcast to reach even more leaders who need encouragement and practical tools. So let's dive in. All right. So let me start with an easy one for you both. Barbara, when you think about your years in district leadership, can you share a moment when you realized that courage, real, intentional courage, was the differentiator between good leadership and transformational leadership?
You know, Kim, that's a great question. And there are a lot of years to think back over. But what really comes to mind was when I was a brand new assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction. Of course, I came into the district with some ideas and definite ways of doing things. And there was a real need, and I wanted desperately to affect teaching and learning. But the old guard wasn't so fond of the change that I brought, and it was not anything cutting edge or out in left field. It was just good, basic research, evidence-based strategies. So I kind of had to back up, went back to the superintendent, restated my vision, made sure he had a clear understanding of what the data said, got his approval, and then I started taking some time with individual principals. And before too long, the culture started shifting. And so I was able to move forward as a team with those practices. And I think the courageous piece there, it came to me in recognizing that I could have easily said, let's wait, let's go slower. But I really felt a need to do things differently and that our children deserved it. So we were able to move forward. And that's really what transformational, courageous leadership is. It's about having an impact for children and doing things even though it's difficult for you.
Yeah, I think change is really hard. I got to be an eyewitness to all of that. And I can tell you that students were the winners. I mean, it's what I want people to understand is what they do in moments like that really impacts a generation of children. You can't do things in the future, you can't change things in the past, but right then, when you were called upon, even though people didn't want to change, you knew it was this moral imperative. And we could feel it, like the team could feel it and get excited about it. And I think what it does is it attracts people who have that same passion. And then you see that change, transformational change. I mean, years later now, I still think my work is impacted by you hugely in what you did in that paradigm shift. And I'm not just saying that because you're on my team. I have said this to you before when I was speaking to the High Point candidates. When there's someone who comes into your life who is a courageous leader, watch them, watch how they make decisions, learn from them. And I'm just so privileged that I was able to do that with Barbara because she is years beyond me in leading people to be courageous. So thank you for that. Murphy, from your vantage point, you are not an educator, right? So, how do you really take this outside perspective, which we think is so important, right? From your vantage point, and you're working with these educational leaders across the country. What do you think you're seeing right now from them? What kind of climate are you seeing from them?
Yeah, I have no background in educational leadership or educator-ness, except for when I went through it myself as like a kid. So I think being on the outside looking in does give me a different perspective for sure. And I can tell that these leaders do need support, and they're just not getting it a lot of times. It seems just super stressful. Um, and they're trying. You can see that they're trying and they're wanting to get that support. And whether it's people just don't know how to give them that support, or they just aren't even seeing that they're not being supported. And when we meet with them and have these conversations, they know that the work that they're doing within these schools is extremely important, not only for the students, but also the communities. And that's something that I've grown to see is schools really do hold communities together. And obviously, when I was going through it, I was just kind of like in such a tunnel vision of, oh yeah, I'm just here, I go to school. That's just kind of what you do, not seeing the outside of the glue that does hold that community together and bring community together, whether it's sporting events or like a school play. And it almost stresses me out to see just kind of the fallout that's happening with these teachers and educators. Um, so, I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see where it goes from here.
You're so right. You can just see the stress on their face, but just like you said, they're so busy putting out fires and doing things every day, they don't realize that they just need to take a moment for themselves and get some help and support and join a network that can really help them. We
Mhm.
we want to do those kinds of things for them. Barbara, you've been teaching and are teaching these future leaders at High Point. What are you hearing about them? I know one of the things when we first started this project, you said this is really something that future leaders need, and they're actually verbalizing that they need what we are getting ready to support them with. How do you lead through crisis? How do you make moral decisions in an environment that's really pressing you a different way? You know, just tell us a little bit about what you're hearing from those folks going through the High Point program.
Yeah, thank you, Cam. Yes, you're exactly right. I recall talking to one specific student about the work we were beginning, and he said, "Why don't we have this in our classes? We're missing this. This is not in our leadership theory courses." And I said, "Well, and we're talking about more than theory, right? We're talking about the practice of what it takes." So the students are brilliant. They're dedicated. Many of them are already in major leadership roles, and they're very anxious. They're alarmed by the challenge of the times. They want to be vulnerable. They want to be courageous. They do need some scaffolding and support to do that. But the hopeful thing here is that these individuals show up every day. They are leaders every day, and they keep doing really strong work for children every day. Let's just provide some tools and some community for them.
Yeah, I agree. And they haven't gotten to that role that they're looking toward yet, but they're almost there. And they may be thrust in early because what we have found is with assistant principals and lead teachers, they're being moved into those principal spots really, really quickly. And principals are being moved up the ladder really quickly. So we want to help them with that. As we're going through these podcasts, we want to share some stories from our book that you guys would find exciting. And the first one is my why. Like, why did I go into education? I mean, I was in the mountains of North Carolina, the perfect corner of North Carolina between Tennessee and Virginia, they call that, because on both sides we have two states. And no one at that point in my family had gone through college. And so here I am in rural Appalachian thinking there's no way I can pay for college. No one really kind of expects us to go to college. It's a farm community. I don't have really an example of someone who went to college before me. My dad was in the military. I was born in Alaska. My mom absolutely could have gone to college, but didn't. She married dad. And so I grew up having people who were encouraging me to really be the best that I could be. And I'm so thankful for that. My church would pay for me to go to Canon Music Camp for a full month at Appalachian every summer. So I would be on the campus of a college, which is so important for our students. And I could kind of vision where music was going to take me. I knew that was my gift. I knew that was my pathway. And the month or so before I went to Appalachian, my dad kind of sat me down and he said, "We really don't have the money to pay for you to go." And I thought, oh. And I said to him, I said, "Well, you must not be trusting God very much. He's a pastor, remember? He should be trusting God." I said, "God wants me to go. I know it. And I know I'm supposed to be a music teacher." And sure enough, I came in right before the end of the school year with the North Carolina Teaching Fellows. And it just opened my whole world. And I went up there and worked with professors I had worked with all through high school. Even the teaching fellow program paid for me to stay and get my master's. I just feel like it was my calling and I loved it. And I taught music for 13 years. I got my PhD at UNC Greensboro. And I went on to really lead educationally, but it was because I had courageous leaders who would say to me, "I think you're meant for more. Like, I think you can do more. I think," and so there was always someone pushing me. And one time Dr. Martin looked at me and he said, "All right, we're going to get you in the superintendent seat." And I was like, "What? Wait, no. And then, of course, within a few years, I was in the superintendent seat and he had called people. He had really pushed people to make sure they gave me an interview. And so anyway, fast forward, I became a superintendent, one of the finalists for the state superintendent of the year. Everything just to me felt like God just gifted it to me. That is my why. And I am so passionate about people who don't think they can do it. They know they have the capacity, but they might not have the money. They're in a place where it's not expected. There are barriers in place for them. So I feel like I really want to make them successful. I want them to see that they can do it no matter what the barrier is. And so when I worked in urban city schools, all of a sudden I saw all this potential. It wasn't the mountains of Appalachian, but it was our neighborhood where the kids never went to college. They never had a pathway to get there. And so I got so excited when I worked with students, and then in Mount Airy we were able to build pathways for every single child. And if they want to get a trade and go to work, or if they want to own that same company, they can be a welder or they can own the welding company. Here's ways you can do that. And so the why mission is so important. And you'll see that throughout our book. We want to dig in just a little bit deeper, and talk about the why that you guys are doing. So let's talk about our team's why. Barbara, why are you doing this? Um, I know it's not the big bucks because there are no bucks. You're doing this because you love this work. Why courageous leadership, and why now?
Yeah. Like you, Kim, I feel the work so deeply, and we're at a real inflection point in education. And that old playbook has been obsolete for a good while. I think about what all of our leaders are dealing with right now. You know, the times just are so different, and the call for the work they must do is harder and harder. Um, there was a superintendent recently who, during budget, was looking at cuts between counselors and literacy specialists, and her community was divided on the issue. She felt like the data really supported the need for her to keep her counselors, and that's what she did. Of course, she was crucified by part of the community on social media, but what she showed was the very next year, those test scores went up because she was able to provide the support the children needed to be able to learn. And so it's those kinds of things. It's helping individuals make the choice to be courageous and to have the skills and tools they need. We all know these are just really difficult times. And so being a part of that support in that community is very important to me.
Yeah, I was on a call with someone today, and she knew the decision that needed to be made, and she was afraid to make it. And I said, you cannot have fear. And even some of these conversations, she's written no fear like over her computer. I said, you have to make it because you know it's the right decision. Now you're professional. You're always thinking about the adults in the situation, but you're making the decision based on what you know is right for children, just like you're telling me. And she just was like, that's right. I just have to do it. I'm like, she says, I'm going to land on my feet. It's going to be okay. And that's the piece we really want to help with this courageous edge. We want to give them the edge to keep going. And again, you got to be professional. You can't lose your head in this. There may be adults making decisions you don't agree with. Keep all that out of it and just keep pushing forward with your mission. It comes down to watching talented people really feel like they're getting burnt out. They're giving up. They're like, I just want to get out of education. In fact, that was the word I heard today. She said, I just don't want to do this anymore. And by the end of the conversation, she was like, nope, we're going to do this. I'm so inspired, And it just took a little bit of encouragement to say, you're doing the right thing. I know you don't want to do this anymore. None of us want to do this when it gets tough like that. But the payoff is when you see the children respond in such a positive way to the pieces that you put in place. And that's the why. That's why we do it. So Murphy, you've seen this too as we've been working with leaders. We've just come from a women's conference where there were a lot of people really talking about this. What difference do you think that the courageous framework can really make for people?
It seems to me that a lot of leaders are asking questions, which I think is number one, realizing that it's not going well. What you're doing isn't getting the scores you want or having the kids be as happy as they should be going to school and learning. And some of the questions are like, how do we get by past these barriers? I mean, just even politically with all the cuts with funding, that's a huge barrier that they now have to figure out how to get around. And so they've been reaching out to us, even at, as you said, the We Lead conference. We've had people come up and say, well, what do we do? And so they're describing the pushback they're getting, and they're just trying to figure out how to be and do the best with what they have, especially now. And I feel like I've noticed that K&E, their framework of being a courageous leader is very simple, but it seems very successful with all the leaders who are implementing it. And being courageous is hard, and we understand that. But going back on that why, like, why are you doing this work? Why do you want to do this? And reflecting on that will really kind of show the path that you should be going. It helps to be clear with your mission, and it does help to have a team that agrees with your mission and is going to lift you up to kind of make sure you're going on the right path and going for that mission. And then I feel like I've noticed K&E, the network has just been expanding. So we have a bunch of people who have probably been going through the same things or close to the same things that a lot of these people are asking us questions about. So we can connect those people to each other and say, you know who you need to talk to? This person. They just went through this. They could really help you out and what their thought process was and all the hurdles they had to jump through in case you used to have those as well. And I think the main thing that people need to know and understand is that they aren't alone. And that involves having the team, having that support, having that community, whether it's your location community or just the community of like-minded thinkers that we're trying to develop. Um, People that are cheering for you. I know Kim is always cheering for Barbara, always. She always is saying, Barbara has taught me so much, and I love that. And Barbara always gives it right back. She's like, well, Kim, you got to lift yourself up too. And she will always, one for one, just give you guys so much support, and I love it. I love working in this environment. And I really think that that kind of attitude of support gets you to where you want to go in the long run.
Yeah, we've got enough people bashing us. So
Exactly.
you're so good at creating a network of people and connecting them. And you're good to bring up the whole thing about the financial struggles. We've heard that the most. Like we
Hmm.
have some expertise in helping you make a robust budget, even though you're on a shoestring budget. We also have heard that PR is a big thing. How do I
Hmm.
do positive PR when all this stuff is attacking me? And we can walk you through some of those things because we have people who've just been through that. So let's talk about that framework. It's very specific. It talks about certain rocks that we have or certain parts of our pathway. We believe that courage isn't something you either have or you don't have. It's something that lives inside each of us. And we can help you develop that and uncover some of the clutter so we get out of our own way and we can be the leader that we were born to be. So, Barbara, you want to talk a little bit about the framework and kind of what that looks like?
It's a straightforward model. It's not something we just dreamed up yesterday. A lot of work's gone into it over the years. You did lots of research interviews, Kim, and then we grounded this in the leadership literature. And so we came up with basically 5 pillars. And that first one, where you started earlier, is the compelling why and knowing why we're doing this work. So when that first crisis comes, you don't get knocked off your feet. And when the 20th crisis comes, you're grounded. You know why you're doing the work, so you can stand firm. The second pillar is belief in yourself. And this is not about being arrogant. It is about being confident in your abilities to lead. And third, of course, is the creation of a culture of courage, because we know we can't do this alone. It takes a team of folks now. And fourth is that flexible framework. We certainly learned from the pandemic that we needed to be agile and flexible and adaptable. And we recognize fully that rigid thinking can just kill courage. And the fifth pillar is moral leadership, doing the right thing, even when it costs. And you've mentioned that, Kim. Of what holds all of those pillars together is that golden thread of empathy, and it just weaves in and out. It keeps courage from being reckless, and it separates being just a bold leader from being a courageous leader. And as you said earlier, Kim, everyone has courage inside them. It is helping them make the choice to use that courage.
Yeah, absolutely. And we even have specific tools that have been rolling out throughout this whole year. It's not just theory, right? We're providing actual tools, strategies, frameworks that we can hand you. Lots of things that we have developed based on these successful leaders who led through crisis successfully. Like by all accounts, everybody felt like they came out on the other end of the crisis in a positive way. And they all have those pillars in their leadership. Every time you interview one, you hear the same thing over and over again. We provide mentorship opportunities, connections with other courageous leaders. Murphy, from kind of an implementation standpoint, what have we been doing to try to support these inspiring, aspiring, courageous leaders?
Yeah. So not to sound like a telemarketer, but K&E does offer ongoing support that is free. We write a monthly newsletter. It has amazing tools, resources, that network of people that are connected together through the webinars and now the podcast. Free coaching and a website that has so many stories from successful leaders that have been through some of the same things that I've heard so many people talk about that they're struggling with. And we can connect you to those. And if you need a mentor, we could definitely kind of find mentors that would work for you, um, because they want to help you grow, they want to help you learn. And we're planning events that if you want to be part of and included in, if you go to our website, www.kndinnovation.org, you can feel free to RSVP on our website and become part of our community of courageous leaders. And it's no cost, it's completely free.
Yes, always just look up at our at our sheet here, kndinnovation.org, because again, everything on there is stuff that you would want to know about. We feature our members on there. Those are the kind of people who just naturally want to help you. That's what I love about education. It's different than any other network that I've been a part of. Educators just want to help you. They just want to share their stories and give you tools and strategies and make you successful. And so another story that we have in our book deals with that golden thread of empathy that Barbara was mentioning. If you'll look at these leaders, they somewhere deep in their core had this like nagging empathy to really step up. And so one thing that we do is help them develop a really deep understanding and clarity of their why and their beliefs. So Dr. Janet Spriggs, who is the president of Forsyth Tech, just recently did an interview for me, and she wanted to tell this core story, because she had to really think about it. She's like, this is really where my empathy comes from. She said, I was a child of the 60s. She said there was a turbulent time. There was a lot of civil rights things going on. Integration was starting to happen in the South where she was. She was on land that they farmed for lease. So they would lease the land and they would farm the land. And she talked about how she was poor, by everybody's account, but rich in community and family and love. And so her mother had taken her into town and there was penny candy. I know, Murphy, you're way too young to understand that you can put a penny and get candy. You know, even when my boys were young, it was a quarter, then 50 cents, and then a dollar. But this was penny candy in a candy store. And so she said she was like 8 or 9, and her mother went into the candy store to get penny candy. So she was just kind of out on the sidewalk waiting for her mom to come out. And there was an African American girl about the same age standing beside her, and she didn't have any shoes on. And she didn't know at the time, that she really probably didn't own any shoes. And she stepped on glass, and it caused her to bleed. And so this little 8 or 9 year old African American girl is sitting beside her, and her foot's bleeding pretty badly. Janet goes on to describe. And she looked around, and there were adults everywhere, and no one helped the child who was bleeding on the sidewalk. And she, as an 8 or 9 year old, knew this was wrong. She said, in her own mind, she was doing this self-talk. What can I do to help her? So her mother came out, the African American mother came out, they had their candy, and they both went into action. They wrapped the girl's foot, they cleaned it, they got her settled. And she said they all sat there and they ate their candy. But on the way home, she asked her mom, she said, why didn't anyone help? And her mom couldn't, had no answer. She said, I don't know. They should have helped. And so Janet was really kind of reflecting on this. And she said, you know what? In her mind right then, she said, I'm going to fight for people to be better. And she said, every time I'm in a leadership crisis, I'm like, those people can be better. This can be better. Everybody around here can respond better. And she just fights things that are cruel and unfair. When things are judged and they're not really what they are, she just gets all involved in that and makes it better. But that's what we help people uncover. Like, they already have that. Like, she says, that crystallizes for her where her empathy came from. She said, I can remember every detail about that incident. And so that's the kind of thing that we want people to think about. When you ask them about that, they almost always tear up because they forget that that's their core driver about why they lead the way they lead. And it is so important. The other question I always ask people to ask that elicits interesting answers is, what would you tell your former self before you went through the crisis that you wish you had known, right? And almost all of them say, I'm going to be okay. We're going to land in a good place. I wish that I had had more belief in self-efficacy in myself. So as you uncover these core values, realize they will guide you to this place of courage.
In part 2, we'll explore the real challenges educational leaders are facing and reveal key characteristics of courageous leadership. Barbara shares what truly sets these leaders apart. Plus, we'll connect you with free resources and support at www.kneinnovation.org. Stay with us, part 2 drops soon.